you?
Hi, Leanne. How are you?
Good.
I'm recovering from a bad allergy.
Recording in progress.
Oh, that stinks.
Well, I'm on the upside, so.
Good.
But I sometimes start coughing, so I may have to mute myself.
Hey.
And are you being attacked by flies or something?
There's like a little fruit fly thing that just keeps flying in my face.
Well, get rid of the fruit.
It's just me. I'm so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. I keep forgetting. I see Mike now. I see Ellen. I see Paul's name, but I don't see Paul. I see a leaf. See Greg.
Yep, that's Joe Roman setting the tone. He's bringing the leaf early.
Yeah.
There he is.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Oh,
Didn't Paul shave this morning? Is that why he's refusing to go to video?
I don't have an answer. I didn't shave, but I got a beard, so unless
solved
I'm
that problem long
in
ago.
person, I don't bother to shave my neck.
You solved that whole shaving problem long ago, right, Greg?
That was actually how my beard started. I just got tired of shaving every day.
Yeah.
Just became annoying.
I did that one time too, and then one day I just shaved the beard off.
I'm so used to it now that I think if it wasn't there, I wouldn't feel right.
Mm-hmm. I moved from there to the electric shaver, and it's been that way ever since.
See, I started with an electric shaver and then went to a regular blade, and now I just do a regular blade with shaving cream. For some reason, it's more satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Which has nothing to do with today's meeting, but
I was going to say, I thought this was planning, not personal grooming, but
well,
it's a fascinating conversation, I got to tell you.
well, of course.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to have a quorum, but Ellen, we're not taking action on Potter's Terrace, are we? Or
No, this is an introduction to the commission on the
Okay.
project itself.
so if we don't have a quorum, it's not the end of the world today.
Correct.
Because I don't think there. I got a little confused and I apologize, but I have the three things: the introduction of the new planning staff, the introduction of Potter's Terrace, and then the census report. So those are the three items, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm not as confused as I thought I was. That's a relief. And have we heard from Mr. Lehman?
I have not. I'll give him a text.
Okay. I'm assuming he's in the building. But we have, let's see, 4 members of the commission: Jeff, myself, Mike, and Paul. And then, of course, Tom is here as our council rep. So I don't want to hold everybody up, so I'll just give it another minute, and then out of appreciation for your time, we'll get started. I noted that I'm on the upside of a very bad allergy attack, so if I have trouble stopping my cough, I'll just mute myself. So don't think I'm not paying attention. All right, well, why don't we get started? Even though we don't have a quorum, we can at least take care of the business that we do have, which doesn't require us to take any action. So I'll call the meeting to order. I think the first item, and Ellen, are you going to introduce the new planning staff person?
Uh-huh. And Casey can do a little of introducing herself as well, but I can at least open the floor to Casey. So Casey is our recent planning and research specialist. Give us a wave.
Oh,
She's again been with us a short time, but already, plunging right in, and an excellent addition to the department. And so, Casey, I don't know if you want to just say hello, give a few words as to kind of where you were before this, and kind of your transition into the city's work.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Casey. I've been with the city now for 2 months. I went to school at JCC, moved on to Fredonia for my bachelor's in sociology, and I'm currently in school right now for my master's in social and public policy. I worked in case management before, didn't like it, wanted to move on to something new, and I've been waiting for this position to open up for quite some time, and it did. So here I am.
And did you graduate from JCC, by the way?
I did.
Great, congratulations. We like to
Thank
hear
you.
that here. And I don't know if either of you want to talk a little bit about it. Is it pronounced Cassie or Casey?
Casey.
Casey, you want to talk a little bit about what you're going to be doing for us?
Yeah, so I work with Ellen mostly. Any projects that she kind of has in mind, or anything that comes up and she needs extra information on it, or too much on her plate, just push it off to me a little bit so I can help alleviate some of the workload off of everybody. Right now I'm working on some tree stuff. We're working on art stuff. We're working on Chodo stuff. So pretty busy over here.
Well, I'm sure Ellen and Crystal and everyone there is happy to have you. So on behalf of the commission, welcome to City Hall, and look
Thank you.
forward to working with you.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll go to number 2, the introduction of the Potter's Terrace project, excuse me. And again, even though we know all of you, if you could just once again, before you present, state your name and residential address, please. So Frank, are you starting off the discussion, or?
I believe that makes the most sense at the moment, Greg. Thank you. Frank Bessie, Urban Core Director of the Jamestown Renaissance Corporation, live at 243 Halleck Street here in the Pearl City. Wanted to be on the agenda today to talk with the Planning Commission about a project we've been working on for the, depending on the scope, several years, or at least, some concerted effort the last several months as it relates to Potter's Terrace, which is at the corner of 3rd Street and Potter's Alley, just off of the intersection of 3rd and Main in downtown Jamestown. And as I think pretty much everyone on the call understands, is that a couple of years ago, the temporary fix of the last 20 plus years was deteriorating to become a safety hazard. That the wooden structure was a fantastic fix, but because that platform is about 8 feet off the ground below it, it was unsafe, and we didn't want any sort of safety issue, so that it was fenced off and explored options to remedy the safety issue and then think about the next phase of the space. This summer, we were able to demo that wooden structure and fill it in to kind of eliminate the safety hazard, and then it became an opportunity to explore the next phase of the project. So we working with Joe Roman, who will kind of walk through a couple of the some parts of the project that he's been involved with as far as thinking about the vision for the space going forward. And it's, our focus is to have it be a public space, and what we're calling is a kind of a passive public space. We're not looking to have some sort of grandstand and performances in kind of active use. We're really looking at some sort of passive, have seating and something that you can kind of take a break from all the other activity that's happening in the neighborhood. And it's really Joe studying downtown in the space to see that there's a lot of opportunity for green space there. And right now we're in the process of exploring the opportunities of the space, the limitations based on size and slope and different things, talking with city staff as to their concerns and their opportunities. And in talking with city staff, we thought it was a good opportunity to bring Planning Commission in while we're still kind of in that research and sketching phase to make sure that we are going through kind of the right path and not missing anything, and just wanted to get some feedback to the research and work that's been done so far. So I thought it would be good to kind of pass it over to Joe, and I hoping that Ellen is able to, or whoever, to orchestrate screen share so that Joe can go over a little bit of the research he's done and some preliminary sketches to kind of give you all a picture, literal picture of what we're looking to do.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Joe. I'm a landscape architect with Leaf and Stone Landscape Architecture. My residential address is 5363 Dean Road out in Stockton, New York. So as Frank had mentioned, and Ellen, I saw a thing come up saying that I'm got co-host ability, so I think I should be all set. We'll see in a minute. As Frank had mentioned, the Gebby Foundation and JRC engaged me a few months back to start taking a look at the Potter's Terrace space. Was tasked with trying to help develop a vision, an interim vision that may end up being potentially, or has potential to be maybe a little bit longer term vision for this space. So as Frank said, we started, I'm just gonna do a quick screen share here. So hopefully you all see this. I believe this is the packet that was sent out to you guys ahead of time as part of this introduction. So just by way of a quick context sort of thing, there's our project site, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We started by taking a fairly high level look at the downtown area. And as part of this visioning for this space, one of the things we were looking at when we were taking a little bit more of a hard look of our whole downtown was trying to identify downtown amenities that are missing, or maybe that if they were present or bolstered may help to bolster our downtown. And one of the things that we really notice when we're looking at this downtown core area is while Jamestown itself is a very green city, the downtown core part is very urban. It doesn't have a lot of green space or open space in the downtown core. And as far as like our most busiest corridors through the downtown, there aren't many spaces that lend themselves to passive recreation, people watching, a place to be able to go outside and eat your lunch when it's a nice day, that sort of thing. So some of that background definitely led us down the path that we started going with our re-envisioning of this space. So again, just by way of context and our location in the city and what we're looking at here. Again, here's a little bit closer up view of the space. This, of course, is plan view of the former condition. And here it is from street view. So as we started looking at the space in terms of public plazas and parklets and downtown cores, we did a bit of a precedent study where we went through a process to identify elements of parklets, park spaces, and some public or semi-public spaces, what those elements are that help really make them successful. So these next couple of slides are just a couple of the elements that we through that process that we identified and felt would be appropriate to apply towards this space if we're able to. So opportunities for mix of uses, making a space that's flexible that allows for multiple types of programming of it. Places for informal seating, seat walls, places to be able to people watch. Definition of edges that help define the space within the larger urban context, and then material usage and visual interest. A fairly standard design principle is when you're designing spaces, people have a tendency to be drawn towards high contrast. So if you're trying to draw somebody into a space, if you're creating a new space that has a now it doesn't have to be jarring contrast, but contrast nonetheless to the rest of the urban area, it'll start to help draw people into that space. So again, these were some of the things that we're thinking about early on as we started looking at that Potter's Terrace space. This, of course, led us down the road of doing some very early conceptual sketching of how we might be able to program out, plan out that space. And through that process, we came up with a couple different concepts, preliminary concepts. This is the first one, which again was incorporating things like definition of edges, greening up the space, creating some informal places for seating with these bench seating that's incorporated into some planter units. Possibly using these planter units not only to help define the edge of the park, but also help with deal with some of the grade change that happens across the space, because as we know, there's a bit of slope that falls from the north side to the south side of the site. And then looking at different elements that may be appropriate for populating this space. One of the concepts that we had looked into early on was does facilitating pop-up retail make sense for this space? We ultimately ended up deciding that we didn't think that was a good fit. But again, that was all part of this initial study. So these are two of the early concept schemes that we came up with as part of this process. We've since taken, there's actually a couple more different design concepts that we edited out. These were the two that were favored by the steering committee the most. And we have since taken that and started refining that space, or refining those design elements, largely by incorporating some concepts out of both these early schemes. So as we continue down the path of refining the design and refining our vision for the space, this is an updated conceptual plan of our current thoughts for the space. To walk you through it quickly, I'll try to do it quickly because I know you've got other things on your docket this afternoon. Largely trying to create a public space within the downtown core that provides a respite for the folks living and working in the downtown, and also those visiting the downtown. So when I say that, one of the things we're thinking about is we want this space to act as the meeting spot for downtown, right? Coming into town to meet up with some friends for some drinks or for dinner. Perhaps this is the spot that you pick to meet downtown before you all link up. Likewise, we envision the space being a spot where folks in the downtown who work in downtown might be able to come out during our nice days, and maybe a spot to grab lunch, or just people watch during your break, those sorts of things. So what we've done here is we've started looking at these concepts of using fabricated steel planter units. These would be open bottom. Something similar to this image here in the lower left or in the lower right hand corner, that we would use to start defining the boundary edges of the park, of this parklet space. Material usage wise, we've been liking the idea of using or incorporating weathering steel. It's got an industrial feel similar to what our city has, but it's also got a bit of a contemporary modern aesthetic to it. Using that material again to fabricate these steel planters, which in some areas, like probably back in this southeast corner, will actually be doing a little bit of retaining work to help us deal with some of this grade change. But again, using those fabricated steel planters to create defined planting areas that we can have some incorporated seating into that. So this becomes a very passive space, developing a series of subspaces within the overall park space. So we've got this lower, what I'm referring to in this drawing here is the lower terrace. This is basically coming in at street level off of 3rd Street. We'd have these, once you enter in the space, there'd be the current vision. The idea is having a series of built-in benches and tables, similar to what you're seeing over in these images over here. And largely having this be a little bit of a flexible space. having a space, having spots there where you can sit, have seating, but it would also lend itself to some amount of programming of the space, depending on what that was. And then we've carved out in the back side of the northern side of the space, what I'm calling the Upper Terrace. So this, basically, we're just trying to work with the grade change that happens across the site currently, and the grades that are running down along Potter's Alley, transitioning up to an Upper Terrace space, which again would have the current vision is having some tables and chairs. Perhaps these are movable, which would allow different use, flexible use of the space, groups to gather. You could push tables together, that sort of thing. And we transition up through a series of steps that also has an integrated ramp. So we're making the space ADA accessible, utilizing the grade change in our advantage to create two very distinct subspaces within the space that could be programmed separately, or as you can see in the plan view drawing, in a whole, they are a cohesive plan here. And then the other idea is, again, dealing with some of the grade change currently with the structure, the old wooden structure that was in Potter's Terrace being demoed out. We've now got some of the foundation along 300 North building showing. So trying to figure out how we deal with some of those issues. So our current idea is also working in maybe a bit of a seat wall that kind of helps with some of these grade changes, helps deal with some of the exposed foundation and spray foam insulation. Again, carving out green space to soften the edges. And then we'd like to work in a bit of a tree grid to create a bit of an overhead plane. So these are our initial concepts of for the space on how we might see it come together in a design sense. We're currently working through the design elements and working on developing a schematic budget or construction budget of what we think these concepts and schemes might cost. And simultaneously, while doing that, we are also looking at all of our options for fabricating the pieces and components that would ultimately compose the park space. So we've been doing some investigation work with working with some manufacturing companies that make these sorts of steel planters off-site, where they then be shipped and basically placed. And we've also been reaching out to local fabrication shops to see if there might be an avenue for engaging some local folks for getting some of the steel boxes fabricated and that sort of thing. I personally don't see why we can't utilize local talent for these. It's not overly complicated. So I guess in a nutshell, here's kind of where we're at with our visioning for this space. I went over it pretty quickly, but I guess just as the primary introduction to the space, this is the road that we're traveling down at the moment. So I'd happy to answer any questions, take any input anybody has to have. I guess I'll leave it at that.
All right, well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Frank. I'm just looking at the drawing, and with my eyesight, are you still planning to keep the potential, it says, I think, potential bicycle parking there?
Yeah, down here?
Yeah. So
yeah,
like with bike racks or?
Yeah, well, we've carved out a spot schematically anyways, where we could certainly incorporate like a bike rack, and there's dozens, hundreds of what styles of what that rack system could actually look like. But again, in an effort to encourage multimodal transportation to this space and use of this space, we did carve out a little corner here for a potential bike rack or bicycle parking.
I think that's a great idea. Supports that whole complete streets approach.
Right.
You're going to ask people to ride bikes. You always have to think about where you're going to put them, and that would encourage walkers, bikers, drivers, all sorts of people to go down there. So I think that's a real plus, and would certainly encourage you to keep it there. So I welcome the fact that you came to us so early. That's always a good idea, but I would love to hear from other members of the commission if they have any questions or comments.
When I looked at the plan, I also went down and took a look at the site the way it is now. And I tend to think that in today's world where there's, especially the downtown is not that crowded anymore, not like it used to be when I was a kid. And, but we never had any place to be able to really sit downtown unless you went into, you know, some kind of a little restaurant there. I think these kinds of things are really, really good. And we've got, what, 9 months out of a year where people can be coming in and kind of enjoying the downtown. And that's a good place for people to stop. Sometimes it's a lot nicer than it is to go in. I don't want to hold anything against restaurants or be against them, and I don't mean it that way, but a lot of times it's nicer to sit outside than it is inside. So
Oh, for sure.
I like what's been planned here with its changes to what it was. And I think it's been good since we first used that space, if you will, for a public purpose.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I think it's, can you hear me on this?
Yeah, we
Yep.
can hear you, Mike.
Okay, all right, yeah, I think it's a really great use of that space. I think it's a smart design. My only recommendation is maybe incorporate something for small kids that would engage small kids while parents are there.
Oh, that's
If
good
they're having
input.
coffee or whatever, you know, yeah, because kids are always restless. They always want to do something, and it probably doesn't have to be overly engaging. Just something for them, something that moves or something that's interactive, or even something historical about Jamestown, or what used to be there, or things to do that are around that area. You can direct people to the Riverwalk and try to incorporate some other places for them to go that's close by.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
overall, I think it's a really good use of that space.
Thanks, Mike. Did you, Joe, have any plans for what to do about that wall of 300 Main Street?
So we've been having some conversations about that wall. So part of what we're trying to do is by utilizing that elevation change across the site to our advantage, that should chew up some of the wall. Granted, it's not going to chew up all of it in terms of the blank canvas that's there. The current plan is to have some foundation plantings along that wall that will help, at least at the pedestrian human scale, start to soften it up and break it up a bit. We've had some conversations about potential utilizing that blank wall as a possible mural spot or a spot for public art to be displayed in some way, shape, or fashion. I even think there was some conversation that we'd kicked around with using some lighting potentially. But as far as the exact plan for what we're going to do along that wall to try to help break up its vast blankness, maybe might be a way to say it. The vegetation will help. The trees will certainly help break it up with the tree canopy. But like I said, we've also been having some conversations within the steering committee about potential opportunities to, I guess, piggyback off the art theme that's already going on down Potter's Alley and possibly utilizing that wall.
And speaking of lighting, will there be enough lighting in this area to keep it safe and hopefully free of vandalism?
Yeah, we admittedly, we haven't gotten to working out placement of light fixtures and looking at the site lighting level aspect of the project yet, but there will be a certain level of site lighting that will be built into this project, and primarily for that exact reason, to make sure we're maintaining at least a minimum amount of light in the site for safety. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a question or a comment?
What's the time that you're thinking to really get started with the physical building of the place, the space?
Sure. So we're moving along on this project, trying to progress it through through the process as quickly as we can. We're currently targeting spring of 2022 construction is what we'd like to be doing. So our intention is to continue through the design process with refining our design. We're hoping to come back to the Planning Commission next month seeking site plan approval for the project. And then from there, we'll carry on through with finishing up our construction document bid package. And from there, we'll move on to getting bids and trying to negotiate a contract with an installer with the goal of doing a spring 2022 installation.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Greg, I just had one.
Sure.
I really love the design and the use of that space, and I'm just a little concerned about the types of trees, the heights of the trees, and the planters and the maintenance of those. Is there consideration for that, and how much maintenance and that the city
Yep.
will do?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So we haven't, again, as you can probably tell, we're not at the level where we've picked species of plants or done any planting designs yet. But that being said, we have had initial conversations. The goal with any of the plantings, particularly the green spaces that kind of define the boundary edges, our intention with the plantings in these areas are they will be a low maintenance planting. It'll be something. So typically how I handle these sorts of spaces or this type of planting is I refer to it as a matrix planting. They'll get planted densely. And then the first couple of years, they will require a bit of maintenance until the plants establish. But the plant palette that will be selected will be such that the plant species will colonize and fill in. So say after year 3, the maintenance impact should be pretty low. At that point, it should mostly be end of the season cleanup or beginning of the spring season cleanup sort of thing. And then everything should kind of come back to life. With regards to the tree canopy, again, because we want to fit more than a single tree or a couple trees in this space to be able to kind of develop that overhead plane feel. I'll be looking at species of trees that what I would refer to as like a small to mid-sized canopy tree, something that doesn't have an overly huge crown. That will be a deciduous tree in nature, but again, we'll be looking at something that will be sized appropriate, like a mature size appropriate for this space. And the intention is to, as we develop those plantings and refine the plant palette, to continue working with the city folks and whoever else is going to be engaged in the long-term operation and maintenance of the site. Because you're absolutely right. The last thing we want to do is create anything that's going to become a maintenance burden, because it will work against us in terms of what we're trying to accomplish here.
And if I could jump in there, Joe, too, to talk about the maintenance, this is, space that is maintained and owned by Jamestown Renaissance Corporation, just like Winter Garden Plaza, which has a few trees, grass that is mowed, garbage that is picked up, and that all of that is in costs that are in management that is incurred by us and not by the city. If you want to start doing that, we would be more than happy to have a conversation about it. But
I thank you for pointing out. I didn't know that. Yeah.
It is our expectation that we will be, responsible for this. So we're signing ourselves up for the ongoing maintenance and operation and not trying to pass the buck on. We do also want to, talking staff level with city staff, okay, we know that there's been bike racks in the terrace near here. There's been garbage cans. We know that if we don't put garbage cans in this space, that'll push into the public space. What can we do to work together? So currently the JRC does have, a garbage removal contract and a property lawn maintenance contract for our other downtown properties. And we would just add this property to that. So we'll take care of it, but also interested in collaboration and making sure that it fits within the context of public works.
Mhm. Good.
If I might just add one point, kind of a longer term perspective, Greg Edwards, CEO, Gebby Foundation, 3606 Nut Road, Bustye. This has been a great project, collaborative, as Frank just pointed out, between the city. Crystal, Ellen, and Jeff have been awesome in this, and Frank and the team at GRC has been great, and Gebby's been involved because of our close working relationship with the city and GRC and owning the building next door. One of the things that has been a great process is the engagement. The second part is seeing the right amount of investment in this parcel. I hope you got the sense that this isn't a half-baked thing. As you can see, there's going to be some significant investment in the space. There is a very clear vision for the potential for the property we own adjacent to this at 300 North Main. The narrow view is a brand new visitor center, one in partnership with the Chautauqua County Chamber, the Jamestown Chamber, and work with the Chautauqua County Visitors Bureau. Again, to try and make full use of that building as it currently exists. We have a facade that's under development by Bemis Bay Architects. Tim Desmond has agreed to be our contractor in the spring to execute that facade. New roof will be going on that building here shortly. I tell you all that because those are what we determine or describe as kind of intermediate investments. Since AECom was in our town 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, it was clearly demonstrated that building was certainly not the highest and best use of that space in the city by design and volume. What they were projected was the opportunity to take that space and this particular space, which is the park, and as our economy evolves, present those two parcels as an opportunity for development to take place for a multi-story, appropriately architecturally designed building to really maximize that space for a mixed use of 3 or 4 stories and that sort of thing. So, but we also recognize, like the wood covering, even if this were a temporary thing, it could be 20 years before the economy gets to the point where a developer wants to really build something of that quality and that size on those space. So our effort at the Gebby Foundation is take our existing building, maximize its capacity, take this open space currently owned by JRC and make it as valuable as we can. And through this process, I've thought that the advisory team's done a great job in coalescing behind an idea and then hiring the right guy, which I think Joe is the right guy to put together a plan for the space. But I just kind of want to give you a little broader and longer term look at that corner of the city and what you're very likely to see over the next short window.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
Anyone else have a comment or a question? If not, thank you very much for coming to us at an early date before we get to the site plan. That we keep trying to get developers to do that. That's really helpful. Get the input now before you get too far down the road. So we appreciate you coming to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then the third item on the agenda was something I had requested, a census report presentation from Ellen. So are you ready to?
I am ready if you want me to take it away.
Yes, please.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Let's see. What do you see on your screen right now?
see the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right, and do you see a full screen or do you see a note screen?
Full screen.
All right, excellent. Okay. So the 2020 US Census is what we're talking about. So not surprisingly, I think to most people is that the census counted Jamestown as an area where population decreased. However, the calculation is most likely inaccurate. So if you track the movement of population since the last census, and particularly the transition between 2019 and 2020, this is all from the American Community Survey of the US Census, the likelihood that we lost 792 people last year is unlikely, just in terms of the trends that were trending over the past 10 years. So it would be nice to say that, you know, they were inaccurate in terms of it trending down, but it's not as down as close to 800 people. It's probably closer to 300 people. So just in terms of putting that in context. And I think all of us are familiar with the challenges that the census faced last year in terms of getting responses and getting accurate data. And I'm sure we're not the only municipality to kind of reflect something that probably suggests it's not entirely accurate. But just as an initial context to that, so Jamestown's population peaked in 1930. And so since then, since the peak, Jamestown has decreased by about 35%. In contrast, cities like St. Louis, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and of course, Buffalo, they peaked about 20 years later. But they have also since to 2020 lost 60% of their, well, between 47 and 59% of their population, which, you know, in terms of how relevant that is, you know, they've had a quicker decline in the loss of their populations compared to Jamestown. So if the rate of decline is relevant for anything, that's just something there for context otherwise. Some other things just to kind of take into consideration in terms of where Jamestown's loss of population fits nationally. Less than half of the nation's 3,143 counties or equivalents gained population in the last 10 years. So again, even though it's not a data point that we really want or find useful for us, it's a pretty common story around places. And I will share all of these slides, so the links that are associated with them, if you want to explore further. Nothing needs to be belabored here in any way, but I'll send the slides along with it. So some other things besides population loss that can have an impact on the city and its ability to operate at a certain level. One of the other things that's been of a conversation is the Office of Management and Bureau's standards regarding Metropolitan and Micropolitan. And again, I wasn't gonna print all of these out, but these links reveal some of that conversation of what the impact to micropolitan statistical areas might be if the OMB goes ahead with basically downgrading certain metropolitan areas and deciding that the criteria and thresholds for being designated a metropolitan statistical area is going to change. And that would make those metro areas micro areas. And so basically you've got more micro areas competing with each other after that. So that's kind of just the general wash. You know, just as another thing to consider is that there are outdated municipal structures, and New York in particular, but a lot of the Northeast, just because they're older governments. And so when they were founded, to whatever extent the structures of those municipalities have not changed over the years, in comparison with Western states and Western municipalities that, were working with a blank slate basically. And so they could kind of build their plane a little bit differently as it was flying, that sort of thing. So certainly one of the challenges is Jamestown is identified as a distressed community. And this is specifically from the Economic Innovation Group. And so they break down what their criteria are for measuring distress, or for that matter, prosperity. And so in terms of distress elements, high school diploma, housing vacancy, unemployment, poverty, certainly nothing earth shattering, but just to kind of have a good sense as to what their metrics and what their matrix is as they identify those things. Again, I will forward that along. The link is there. The work that the Economic Innovation Group is doing is very interesting. So this is, these are some screenshots. I'm sorry if these are small. So again, forward these along. So the higher the number, the more distressed the community. And you'll see that Jamestown gets a nice high score of 93.1. Whereas its adjacent and immediate communities surrounding, DeWittville is 34.6, I believe that is. And that is in the range of what the EIG has termed comfortable. Bemis Point, even lower, and again, low is good, 29.5, I believe, comfortable. And then Lakewood at 17.9 is prosperous. And again, these are communities that we share borders with otherwise in the scheme of things. So just in terms of where geography comes into play with things. So one of the things that's interesting is that, connecting population loss to a level of distress to the community is certainly not a one-to-one. It's not as though there aren't indirect correlations between population loss and the possibility of distress. But you'll also notice that, again, here's the same data of Jamestown's peak in 1930 compared to Lakewood and Bemis Point, which have also been declining in population and at greater rates and more recently as well. But this table, this table over here kind of shows that again, the relationship of population loss to prosperity or distress it's not one-to-one. So again, just to take that consideration in terms of where population loss falls with that. So, in the sense that if you were to apply a traditional SWOT analysis to Jamestown, and let's forget about the weaknesses and the threats, we know them, we're all too familiar with them, but to really focus on strengths and opportunities more specifically. And so one of the strengths really is our housing affordability. And that's really distinct from affordable housing. And we can talk about that for days, but really housing affordability is not synonymous with affordable housing. And Jamestown can really boast as to having housing affordability in terms of an accessible cost of living. Some interesting data here in terms of action in the recent housing markets is that by July 2021, Jamestown home prices were up 100.2%. Lakewood homes were up 16%. On average, Jamestown houses were selling after 13 days, and on average, Lakewood was selling after 29 days. And so, no one's going to say, oh, well, it's because of the fabulous housing stock that Jamestown has, in terms of the quality of the housing stock, because overall, that's probably not the case in comparison to Lakewood, but in terms of its affordability and the opportunity to kind of enter into the home ownership market, Jamestown has obviously done something right in terms of being able to see 100% rise in home prices. One of our other strengths is density. And so Jamestown's density is about 3,210 people per square mile, just in comparison to Buffalo. So Buffalo's about twice as dense as Jamestown. Jamestown has a density that is otherwise pretty comparable to Houston or Phoenix or Columbus, Atlanta, Spokane. So in terms of how familiar you might be with those areas, the density in terms of population, not the amount of people, but just the amount of people per square mile. And on the right, just a graphic there that kind of shows the benefits of a dense environment. And one of the biggest opportunities that I've come across, and this kind of ebbs and flows in terms of kind of where it is in the legislation process. I'll share a little bit more about this, but is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. And the crux of the bill being put forward is really trying to address the appraisal gap and the value gap. And we know that that's a really big barrier to a lot of property ownership, home ownership, whether it's residential or commercial. That becomes a really big barrier here in Jamestown. And again, since it's a familiar story to lots of other municipalities, this is why it's become a national effort with that as well. So I broke out some of it. Again, I'm not going to read all of this to you. But in terms of really how the Investment Act is meant to operate, if I believe it's passed the Senate. No, I think it's passed the House. Anyway, I'll show that to you in a second. But to just basically to introduce you to this and have it on your radar, because there are things that you can do as private citizens to show your support and hopefully usher this legislation along as well. So with that, I'm just gonna get out of here and whoops, sorry. And go into, here we are. So here's the webpage for the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. And so again, I'll share all of this, the link is there, but this really breaks down again, what the bill is for and how it is intended to operate. There's sample support letters. So again, as a private citizen, you can take a sample support letter and forward it along to our legislators. There's also, again, just breaking down other information about it as well. But to have legislation in place that is specifically designed to address the barrier around the appraisal and the value gap, I think is encouraging. That's all I got.
Do you have any comparative statistics with Dunkirk and Olean in terms of, did they go down as much as we did? Did they stay steady? Excuse me.
I don't, but I can look that up right now.
We have this situation in which for the first time in my life, Buffalo supposedly went up.
Yes.
So
yes, and they have attributed that largely to a refugee settlement in Buffalo, and that's actually an initiative that the Economic Innovation Group is working on as well, in terms of really creating a dedicated program out of immigration possibilities.
but also a complete count committee, which
Well,
my understanding is Buffalo and Erie County were very aggressive about, and we weren't. So I tend to doubt those census figures too, but I think a really good point of comparison would be Olean and Dunkirk, who in many respects face some of the same problems we do as being small cities, relatively
Yeah.
remote.
well, they are much smaller cities than Jamestown is.
Yeah, I know,
Jamestown is
but I
the
mean, as a point
population
of
center
comparison.
of the county.
But as a point of comparison, I'm always curious, because that my research since my fellowship has been on the 8 small cities of Western New York, not adjacent to a metropolitan area. And of those 8, Jamestown is the one that does the worst with the New York State Controller's Office in terms of both internal and external threats. Our score is very similar to Buffalo, although Buffalo apparently may have gone up in population. So I'm always curious about the small cities that sort of like satellites around Buffalo, but aren't directly dependent upon Buffalo for growth. And then the other question I have is about, our population. I'm assuming that the census would show us getting older. I would assume showing us getting a little more diverse, at least in terms of race and other indications, but I don't know if you have any information that you can share on that.
I focused mostly on the numbers.
Right, so, but yeah, so the number of older people versus the number of younger people.
Oh, I focused mostly on the numbers of the total population.
Right, but I'm asking questions about the breakdown because I
Right,
know what the census.
yeah, I didn't pursue those. I was going down the rabbit hole of what the numbers as a whole show.
Yeah, but it'd be really helpful to have those comparisons and then also look inside us. I suspect we are definitely older. I'm certainly contributing to that. I suspect we're still saying predominantly white, but I don't know that. And I think one of the things that's getting in the way of us is that, speaking on behalf of old people, as I start to get closer and closer to that, you need young people and you need to be a diverse city. And I think those are two things that, without looking at the numbers, I think we're lacking right now. So I think those numbers are a good indicator of how well we're doing. And I have not seen anything to indicate any of that, but I'm really curious. So anybody else want to ask a question or make a comment?
Just Ellen, I think this is something that you should present to the housing committee. We contact Marie Kruba and see. It was interesting. I think they would.
Great. Yeah.
Very interesting too.
Happy to.
Mm-hmm.
I think any information that you've got and want to distribute out, because I've been looking for some more on it, because I've always been curious about watching all the changes that go about in my community that I've lived in for gang years. And so any sheets that you could just email to me or anything would be helpful.
I can do that.
I've been interested in it because I've been involved in developing for so long in the area, and boy, have we seen some changes go on. So when you get involved with the public, you tend to see them easier.
Anybody else have a comment or a question? Anything else to come before the commission this afternoon? Well, I can ask for a motion to adjourn, even though there's only, at this point, 4 of us, but would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mike. Would anybody like to second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.
Have a good week, end of it at least.
And a better tomorrow.